Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a theory that's as influential as it is controversial. It's one that tries to find a kind of evolutionary blueprint for human desire, and it's called sexual strategies theory.
So let's kick things off with a question that, honestly, every single one of us has probably asked at some point. Why are we drawn to the people we are? Is it all just culture, chemistry, and random chance? Or is there maybe a deeper, more ancient script shaping our choices in love?
To even start to unpack one possible answer, we've got to go back in time. And I mean way, way back. This whole framework suggests that a lot of our modern preferences, the things we look for in a partner today, are actually just echoes of the critical survival and reproductive problems our ancestors had to solve.
And that brings us to 1993, when psychologists David Buss and David Schmitt proposed this very idea. Their core argument is that we didn't evolve just one single, one-size-fits-all approach to mating. Instead, it's more like we have this flexible psychological toolkit with different strategies designed for completely different romantic situations. Okay, so let's get into the heart of this theory. It basically splits our entire mating psychology into two distinct arenas. The theory's main claim is that the rules of the game totally change depending on the goal. Are we talking about a brief encounter or a lifelong partner? Because according to the theory, the challenges you need to solve in each scenario are worlds apart, not even in the same ballpark. First, let's explore the adaptive problems the theory predicts for short-term mating. And this is where the proposed strategies are expected to diverge most sharply between men and women. So the key takeaway here is that in a short-term context, the theory argues that men and women were basically facing fundamentally different challenges. For men, the predicted focus was on partner number and accessibility. For women, it was a totally different set of problems, like securing immediate resources or assessing a man's genetic quality without committing to someone who might not stick around. Okay, but what happens when the goal shifts to a lifelong partnership? According to this framework, the problems to solve, and therefore the best strategies to use, change dramatically. Now, in long-term mating, this is where the strategies actually start to converge a bit. Suddenly, things like commitment and being a good parent become top priorities for both sexes. But the theory still predicts some unique underlying challenges. For men, the problem of paternity certainty, and for women, the problem of securing a partner's long-term investment and resources. Now, this is all a really compelling framework, right? But what about the evidence? Well, Buss and Schmitt didn't just propose this idea. They went out and gathered a ton of data to test their predictions. So let's take a look at some of what they found. So check this out. When they asked people about their ideal number of sexual partners over different periods of time, a really consistent pattern emerged. On average, men reported desiring a significantly higher number of partners than women, which lines up pretty neatly with the theory's predictions for short-term mating strategies. And this next chart really drives the point home. It shows the reported likelihood of consenting to sex after knowing someone for a certain amount of time. And wow, just look at that divergence on the left. After only an hour or a day, the gap is huge, with men reporting a much higher probability of consenting. Okay, let's switch gears to long-term preferences and see how this all builds. When people were asked about a committed partner, how important are financial prospects? Well, this data, which was gathered across many different cultures, shows that women consistently rated good financial prospects as more important than men did. This supports the theory's claims about resource investment. And on the flip side, when those same people were asked about the importance of physical attractiveness, the priorities flipped. Again, across these cultures, men placed a higher value on it. The theory links this to evolutionary cues for things like fertility and health, what researchers call reproductive value. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Is our modern dating life really just a replay of some ancient program? At the end of the day, this theory gives us a powerful, if highly debated, framework. It argues that our mating psychology isn't a blank slate, but a kind of toolkit shaped by deep evolutionary pressures. It's a compelling way to explain some of these persistent patterns we see. But, and this is a huge but, it's not the whole story. Culture, personal experience, and individual choice are obviously massive parts of the equation too. You know, the authors themselves put it plainly. The temporal context, that's just a fancy way of saying short-term versus long-term, is the main event. In their view, it's the master switch that activates all the different desires and rules that guide our search for a partner. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In our world of dating apps and rapidly changing social norms, how much does this evolutionary lens really explain? And maybe just as importantly, where does its explanatory power end? That's the question this theory leaves us all to consider.